All right, welcome back to our Ecosystem Explorers podcast for the second episode. As always, we have our team here. My name is Grace Crissy.
My name is Jimmy Michaels.
My name's Alyssa Case.
And my name is Alyssa Case.
And we hope you enjoyed our first episode on Pine Flatwoods. And today we're going to be talking about aquifers and springs in Florida. We'll have a similar setup as last episode where we're going to introduce you to the ecosystem. We have a special guest with us as well to give us some insight into the management of these resources, and we're going to explain some conservation issues that surround these areas. So first off, we're going to start with Alyssa and Ellie to give us some information on aquifers and springs.
So to begin, aquifers are underground layers of permeable rock that allow fresh water to flow through them. Here in Florida, we have 1 to 3 different layers of aquifers throughout the state, our most productive one being the Floridan aquifer. This covers the entire state of Florida. These aquifers are confined underground by various materials, including sandstone, gravel, and fractured limestone. And the place where this water exits from the underground and flows into the surface water is called a spring.
There are about 1,000 known springs in Florida, and the fresh water that seeps into them is clean and cold. The underground water supplying the springs provides a constant temperature, making them a great home for a variety of plants and animals. Cypress trees are common, as well as eelgrass, bladderwort, and duckweed. They're also home to manatees, alligators, and many species of birds. Turtles like the Florida softshell and yellow-bellied sliders are very common, as well as fish like the bluegill sunfish and alligator gar.
While we're talking about aquifers and springs, there are many conservation issues surrounding these natural areas. Some of these conservation issues include invasive plants that are present in the springs. These plants can block sunlight and increase competition between many different species. Sea level rise has contributed to rising water and incoming salinity into the spring systems, which are normally freshwater. Pollution and waste from people visiting the springs, industries, animals, etc. And large aquifer withdrawals from people taking out water for irrigation, industry, bottled water companies. There's also increased nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus from runoff of agriculture and other industrial practices near the springs. And finally, we have phosphate mining, which is heavily linked to red tides and other negative effects on the springs. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection in 2016 said that the Florida legislature identified 30 Florida springs that require additional protections that include water quality restoration plans called Basin Management Action Plans, or BMAPs. These plans are focused on reducing nitrogen pollution that is impacting the water quality of the springs. To further give us some insight into how these areas work and how they should be properly managed, we have a special guest from UCF. I'll hand it over to our host, Grace, and our special guest, Amanda Lindsay, from the UCF Stormwater Management Team.
All right, so we are here with Amanda Lindsay for UCF Stormwater Management. It's really nice to have you here with us. I appreciate it. So I was going to start with asking, what are some of your job responsibilities?
So as UCF's Stormwater Compliance Manager, I'm in charge of basically, as the title says, all of UCF's stormwater compliance. So we record all kinds of information for our compliance permitting, anything from public outreach and involvement to how often are we inspecting our stormwater infrastructure, how often are we cleaning it, and then if there are any what they call illicit discharges or anything that's not stormwater that ends up in our stormwater, what are we doing to kind of recoup and fix those illicit discharges? And so the permit is called the NPDES, or National Pollution Discharge Elimination Permit. And so we're a small permit holder as a university, and all state universities have this permit. So it can be a really big job, but here at UCF, it's not huge. It's kind of a lot for one person, so we're looking to expand so I can have some help. But I do have students that work under me. So I have 2 paid student employees, and then under them we have 3 unpaid interns. So we have opportunities for students. Usually I get environmental engineers to kind of learn the ins and outs of NPDES and stormwater compliance and what types of jobs are out there in that. So it's a really cool program that is through the Learning by Leading, which is spearheaded by the UCF Arboretum. So our students are part of that Learning by Leading group, which is a great opportunity for students to learn a multitude of different things, but mine is stormwater based.
That kind of goes hand in hand with this next question. So what does a typical day look like for you?
So UCF is over 50 years old now, and so our system hasn't really been heavily maintained over that time period. So In the last 2 years, we've done a full system inspection and clean out over our 26 miles of stormwater system that haven't been managed very well over the last 50 years. We had a lot of repairs that were necessary. So we've kind of been systematically going through and trying to hire contractors to do chunks of it because it's so much that it would be millions of dollars to do all at once. So we've been trying to repair it. It's kind of like a 5-year plan, but we have a big chunk that's coming down the pipeline right now that we're trying to get funding for. So that process has created a lot more day-to-day work for me, which is great. I mean, I like to be busy. It's been fun.
Right.
Yeah, so my interns were helping me go through videos and look like, oh yeah, this is one that needs to be done. And so we had a huge 50-page report that we created and sent out to contractors, and we're getting prices for all the repairs. So that has been a big part of it. Also, I kind of work with the students, and they've done a social media contest to for a UCF student to create the design for our curb inlet awareness decal.
Okay.
So you might have seen these out in the world. It says no dumping, drains to lake, right? Mm-hmm. So we wanted to have one that was a little more entertaining. So we had a student design. She actually did 2 sticker decals. So we worked on getting all those printed, and we did a concrete decal. So we'll see how long those stand up. You never know with those types of things, but we saw that the no smoking campus ones lasted at least 5 years, so hopefully these do the same, but they're working on installing those right now too. But that was kind of a fun project. And we also run the Adopt a program, which is Adopt a Road and Adopt a Pond on campus. So different organizations can adopt either a pond or a road, and then they go out and they do cleanups, and then we use all that data that they send us for our NPDES report. So that's a lot of some of our outreach that we do, but there's a lot of data management that goes with the Adopt a program, because we collect information on how often they go out, how many people, how much trash was collected, how many hours were spent, and then we report all that for NPDES at the end of the year. So those are a couple things that fill our days, and then obviously just meetings and budget things, which come with any job. Yeah. But working with the students is a lot of fun.
Cool, awesome. That sounds really cool, actually. I didn't know how much goes into putting these things together, so
yeah,
it's very cool.
It's hard to explain it all too, but those are some of the fun parts.
Okay, cool. And then with something recent, of course, that everybody knows about, with the 2 recent hurricanes that we just had, how does something like a natural disaster impact the water systems that you're managing?
So we did really well because we had our system cleaned out and inspected recently, and we kind of knew where our shortfalls were. A lot of the major repairs had already been made. So we were very pleased with how our system performed. Close to no flooding on campus. We did have some water intrusion in some areas, but in the past we've had a lot of water intrusion, and some of the buildings that are prone to flooding didn't flood, so that was really great. And I mean, before there was buildings here, you didn't really have to worry about flooding. It wouldn't matter if it flooded. The water could fluctuate with natural disasters, and that's just the way it goes. But now that we humans are here, it matters because our stuff gets ruined. Right. So that's the main thing we're looking out for is the flooding going to impact us? And so as we install all these impervious surfaces that water can't filtrate through, we got to make sure that we've installed a system that's going to carry that water away. And this was a huge test to our system. Being a 500-year storm, we got almost 15 inches of rain in 24 hours. Yeah. Unprecedented. Our system performed really well, and we were very happy that we had gone through and spent the money that we did to get the system cleaned out and inspected, and we were confident that it wasn't going to be horrible, and it wasn't, so that was great.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions we had for you, but thank you for taking the time out of your day to help us out. So
awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right.
Thank you to Amanda and Grace for taking the time out of your day to do that interview to talk to us about water quality management and how it affects our springs and ecosystems around them.
There's also some significant scientific research being done to help protect aquifers and springs and those that inhabit those areas. One of the largest threats that Florida springs face today is nutrient pollution due to fertilizer runoff.
When agriculturists or everyday citizens use fertilizer on their lawns or crops, the excess chemicals are washed away with the rainwater, making their way to other Florida waters such as the rivers, estuaries, and springs, leading to what's called eutrophication.
According to a study published by the Journal of Environmental Management on the nutrient quality of waters of Florida, One potential effect of this excess nitrogen and phosphorus in water bodies is an increase of growth of algae, which causes an increase in toxins from bloom-forming algal species. These toxic algal blooms are a major threat for many reasons. These algae deplete the dissolved oxygen in the waters and form a dense layer on the surface of the water, blocking the sunlight for the plants down below.
Without oxygen and sunlight, plants such as seagrasses are killed, which disrupts the food chain for the spring's ecosystems and starves animals such as manatees. According to an Orlando News article from October of last year, there were 959 recorded manatee deaths from January to October, which is more than any full year in state records. And scientists blame starvation due to water quality.
Due to this unprecedented mass of manatee population loss, scientists are working to remedy this issue, beginning with the studies and going back to the root of the problem, pollution.
So they gave us some great insight into what the scientific community has done to help understand and preserve these ecosystems. And we're here to give the everyday person some tips as well.
There are quite a few plans being implemented to protect aquifers and springs across Florida, like the BMAPs and the Aquifer Protection Program. But it's going to take a lot of cooperation from all sides to conserve these areas. There are a variety of things that you can do to help conserve the vast amount of aquifers and springs that Florida has. So there are a couple things that you can do as an everyday person. You can do your part as a voter. Definitely take the time to research your local elections, and it's super important to elect candidates that will take the necessary steps to protect our environment. You can also support local nonprofits. We have a few listed in our sources that you can go ahead and check out. There is also the Florida Specialty Springs license plates. You can get those at the DMV and replace your regular license plate. So $25 of that license plate fee goes to springs conservation. So that's an awesome option as well. We also have the Ichetucknee Alliance and the Rainbow River Conservation Incorporated. Those are a couple of nonprofits that you can support as well. So another great option is sustainable ecotourism. A lot of springs and rivers do have recreational water activities for people to enjoy, such as paddleboarding, kayaking, diving, and swimming. Rainbow River is also a really cool option. It is off of the west coast of Florida. I actually did a dive there in May. They do have a lot of cool fossils and even some shark teeth to find in that river, which is a really cool option. Crystal River is another great one to see as well. Manatees do kind of migrate in there during the wintertime to get away from the colder Gulf waters, so that is a really cool sight to see as well. And for any UCF students, if you want to go to a springs closer to our area, it's going to be Wekiwa Springs. That's also another great option that's a bit closer to us. And most privately owned springs in Florida do have reasonable entrance fees, so I would encourage friends or family to come with you and make a day out of it and do something to support the conservation of these areas.
Those are some great ways to increase conservation, and here's some ways that you can get active around your house and your community. Be conscious about your water use. Excess water use can drain the aquifers. Consider stop using excess fertilizers. This can increase nutrients inflow into the spring systems. Stop storm drain dumping and encourage others to do so as well. And by this, we mean dispose of chemicals properly. You can take these chemicals to landfills usually, and they'll dispose of them for you, so they're not just getting dumped into the storm drains. And also, if you're going to be boating or doing recreation in the springs, use safe boating practices, as in not to kick up substrate, because this can destroy vegetation and encourage invasive plant growth to take over where these natural plants once were.
Well, that just about wraps up our second episode of Ecosystem Explorers. It is really important to remember that we all share the ecosystems of Florida with some amazing flora and fauna, including keystone species like the manatee, who help keep the ecosystem in balance. So keep in mind that knowledge is power, and we can utilize that to bring about change for the better. Aquifers and springs are vital ecosystems to an abundance of organisms and a vital water source to all living things in Florida, including us. We hope you learned something about aquifers and springs and how to protect them with your everyday actions. Thank you all for tuning in.